Hello again. 50 or 60 years ago, the Metropolitan Police were wholly apolitical. Individual officers may have had their own views and opinions, but the force itself was strictly neutral. They would deal with a demonstration against the war in Vietnam in just the same way they would handle a march in support of Enoch Powell. Their behaviour towards protest marches was very simple. They would give directions to those participating and expect their instructions to be obeyed. If they were not, or if disorder began to develop, the police would step in and put a stop to it. In short, they saw their role as maintaining public order and ensuring that the general public were not inconvenienced, intimidated or frightened. I know this because I took part in protests in the 1960s and 1970s, and the police never showed the slightest inclination to favour one side or another. Things are very different today because the police are openly hostile towards some types of demonstration and very easygoing and tolerant of others. For example, if a march is in favour of homosexuality, the police will join in enthusiastically, even to the extent of wearing rainbow badges, or, as we saw yesterday, painting their patrol cars with rainbows and stars to show that they are keen supporters of the right to commit, well, what we used to describe at one time, I suppose, as unnatural acts. They're not neutral about this, but very definitely in favour of folk carrying on in that way. In the same way, any protest which involves black people automatically gets the police stamp of approval, with those taking part being given licence to topple statues, set fire to Union flags, and generally behave like a bunch of football hooligans. The police are on the side of black demonstrators, even to the extent of kneeling abjectly before them. On the other hand, some kinds of protest the police disapprove of and will break up swiftly. I'm sure that viewers noticed over the last year or so how tough the police have been towards anybody gathering in groups to show their opposition to lockdown. This indicates that the police will not tolerate some kinds of demonstration. 6 months ago, after a woman was murdered by a police officer, there was a vigil on Clapham Common in London. Everybody remembers how the police manhandled the women taking part, I think. There is a clear and obvious pattern to their actions. Left-wing types approve of homosexuality and love ethnic minorities. This means that the police will cosy up to those kinds of people. Left-wing types do not approve of people who refuse to wear masks, and so police come down hard on that category of people. Once you have grasped this simple principle, it is possible to predict well in advance how the police will handle any particular protest. Before the Extinction Rebellion disruption in central London on Monday, the police issued a statement in which they described this as an important cause. This is simply extraordinary. Try and imagine the police in the 1960s announcing that protests against the war in Vietnam were an important cause, or if they described a march in favour of Enoch Powell as an important cause. There would have been an uproar, with questions being asked in Parliament. That is because this creates a most dangerous situation. For the police to express an opinion like that about the subject of some protest or other is quite shocking, but nobody these days seems to be bothered about this. Let's check if I'm right about this by conducting a little thought experiment. When Extinction Rebellion blocked off many streets in central London on Monday, the police left them to their own devices for most of the day, even permitting a crane to install an obstacle across a busy road. That's because, as the police spokesman said, it was an important cause. Now let us suppose that hundreds of people gathered in central London demanding a halt to immigration. Does anybody seriously imagine that they would have been treated as leniently? I'm sure that I cannot be the only person who has noticed that the police in Britain do not even attempt to disguise their enthusiasm for fashionable left-wing causes and their distaste for anything which looks vaguely right-wing. This is a horribly dangerous development, as it calls into question the extent to which ordinary people can rely upon the police to help them. We could easily end up with a situation where somebody thought to be conservative or right-wing would find that the police were less eager to assist him than they would a black homosexual. Once you reach such a state of affairs, people will start organising their own policing, with all the disadvantages for society that such a move entails. This is not, by the way, a fantasy. In some parts of London, Stamford Hill in the borough of Hackney for instance, the local community already do this with a group called the Shomrim, because they do not think that the Metropolitan Police are keen on tackling crimes by Muslims and others who attack Jews. This could be the sign of the way that things are heading in the future.